Welcome back to Hotspot. You miss me, guys? Well, we are back with a bang, and we have a treat for you. Our first ever podcast studio guest, my boy Asaf from Riding the Bench podcast. Go check that out. We basically did a 4-hour podcast. I've split it up in 3 episodes for you, and we will be revealing them over the next 3 days. This first video, we will be talking about the Eagles winning Super Bowl 59. That's right. We are now the world champions. What that meant to us, how that compared to the win in Super Bowl 52, and what the Super Bowl victory means for Jalen Hurts, the Super Bowl MVP, and Nick Sirianni. Are they the greatest quarterback and coach in Eagles history? How does Jalen Hurts now stack up against all the top elite quarterbacks in the NFL? We will get that covered on this episode right here on Hotspot. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Hotspot. First time in a while, really, since this happened, that I'm actually on live, and it's the first time ever that I've actually had a studio guest with me, a very special guest here with me. I've got Asaf from the Loud on the Bench Eagles podcast. Go check him out, and by the way, make sure you are liking and you're subscribing to the channel. Make sure you're liking and subscribing as well. Riding the Bench. I'll leave the link to his channel in the description. But make sure also follow us on Instagram, our TikToks. But yeah, we are here, and yeah, I'm just gonna let off go. How you doing, man?
I'm 6 feet above, brother. I'm okay. I can't complain. Being world champs feels pretty good. And now we're entering the NFL draft, which is right around the corner. So now, right now everything's pretty much, as they say, dandy, right? As they
Yeah,
say, right? Everything's dandy right now in Eagle Land, so I can't complain at all.
yeah. Did you get yourself any of this stuff yet? The merch?
I do have a Super Bowl championship hat, but you listen, I'll keep it a buck with you, man. I'll keep it 100%. I'm broke. I don't got a lot of money in my pocket. I can't buy too much merchandise at the moment, but I tried. I put most of it in the studio and trying to update stuff here. But I do have the hat. I do have the 59 hat because that is important. It's probably the most significant championship, I think, at
Oh
least of my
yeah.
lifetime. So in that sense, I did have to have something in my possession for that. So definitely have the hat, but I don't have anything else at the moment in terms of other gear regarding the championship. So
Yeah, awesome. No, I collect them like the Lombardis. I got this hat. I got the 52 hat.
oh wow,
Yeah.
so
So yeah,
you're
they're
about it.
like
Good for you, man.
Look, Eagles aren't my only sports team, so I will collect the championship hats. I'm also a Milwaukee Bucks fan, so I got the championship hat of that. Hoping to add an Arsenal Champions League to that this year, but we'll see.
So right.
Yeah, anyway, so we might as well kick it off and go back to the fact that we're champions and talk about
Sure.
Super Bowl 59. And look, obviously, both of us we've been guests with Jacob Sports in the past. We've voiced our opinions leading up to that. I feel both of us came out of that looking very, really good because we stood behind this team, when people were doubting us. That's the way Philly media is.
Hmm.
When things get tough, we start to just throw everything out the window and throw a temper tantrum rather than just realizing that, we're a really good team and there's a lot of great, that can happen. And obviously the best possible scenario happens. So, walk me through Super Bowl 59 for you, your experience, you felt the game went, or the whole season maybe in general.
I guess if you don't mind, maybe I'll walk through the whole season. I'll kind of take it by
Yeah.
sections, I guess. That
Yeah.
first
All
12
good.
weeks of the year, I think were probably the most confused I was about this team. I had no idea what the pulse of the team was. And I don't think any Eagle fan had an idea of what the pulse was because we
No.
just came off the collapse the season before. And, we were seeing how they were playing, and there were stretches where they were really, really good, and stretches where they were really terrible. And you just couldn't get a pulse on the team. Then we go into the bye week after the Bucks game, which we got annihilated in, and it was literally just an absolute chaos. Like everyone thought Nick should have been fired. Everyone thought Jalen Hurts should have been, was a waste of a $250 million contract. You got to get rid of half these players. Kellen Moore's a bomb. Right? Everything was on fire here. And then all of a sudden, you go on a little bit of a win streak here, and you start stringing together games. And then for me, by the time we played Baltimore and we won in Baltimore, I felt at that very moment we were the best team in football, and I didn't think it was close. Like, I felt that very confidently. I'm like, we're going to the Super Bowl, and the only team that maybe had a chance to beat us was the Kansas City Chiefs. That was my belief at that moment. I didn't think Detroit could beat us. I didn't think Washington could beat us. I didn't even think Buffalo or Baltimore could beat us in a situation like that. And as the playoffs rolled around, we got the Packers in round one because, that's just how the cookie crumbled. Thought it was the perfect first round matchup. I talked about it when the weekend was there. We got a win there. Then we played the Rams, which I thought that's the toughest game of the year. Like I think the Rams are a football team. I think they're one of the best in the NFC. I think they're the second best team in the NFC, in my opinion.
Well, I disagree with you on that. We can get into that later. But...
Yeah, we can get into that a little bit later. I think they're very good.
Yeah.
But again, you got Sean McVay, Matt Stafford, and they're the one team that took us to the brink. They were in a position where they had the go-ahead drive to go ahead and score, and then Jalen Carter made the play. So we squeaked by that one, and then Washington, talent mismatch, obliterated them. And at that point, I went into the Super Bowl, the most confident I think I've ever went into a Super Bowl in my life. I did not think at that point Kansas City had any shot to beat Philadelphia, unless Patrick Mahomes went nuclear. And even then, there was just no way that they can keep up. And then we end up winning 40-6. And I know the final score said 22, but it was 40-6, right?
I agree.
Every Eagle fan knows that it's 40-6. We obliterated them. And everything that the season went through completely was validated. And it was a great, great experience. This Philadelphia Eagles season truly was.
Yeah, well, how would you compare this, man, to Super Bowl 52? Like, are there difference? Like, obviously, there's no love like your first. Your first girlfriend's, you always remember your first girlfriend, even though most of the time she doesn't end up being the one that you marry. You know what I mean? So maybe that's maybe one is the first girlfriend and this one is the wife. You know what I mean?
Hey, right. So it's interesting. This is gonna sound very weird coming from an Eagles fan. I didn't feel anything from the first Super Bowl. I didn't.
Really?
I genuinely didn't, because it wasn't something that I expected. Once Carson Wentz went down, I did not think we had any shot. I really didn't. And the fact that we even got there, I thought was a win. I thought it was miraculous we even got there. And then when we won, maybe it was just the fact that I was so shocked that we won against Brady and the Patriots, and we won in the fashion that we did. I think it just took me a while for it to sink in, hey, you just won the freaking Super Bowl, your first one in franchise history. You know what I mean? Again, in that sense, it means something to me, but in that moment, I can't sit there and say that I was completely overwhelmed with the emotion that we won, because I was just in total shock that we even got there, let alone won the whole damn thing. So, if you're talking about comparing what that one meant versus what 59 meant, 59 to me meant so much more, because like you said, everybody in Eagles Nation, everyone in the national market was talking about this team everything was on fire. And we went out and just proved to everybody we were head and shoulders better than anybody. And when everybody thought this team was on the downslope, like you said at the beginning, I think you and I were one of the, people who were articulating this, who had platforms like a podcast, who were saying hey, just stay with the course. We're going to get there in the end. It's just a matter of time. And we ended up being validated. And every Eagle fan at that point is just immensely happy, because not only was it a dominant performance, one of the greatest teams I think I've ever seen in franchise history, one of the best defenses in franchise history, one of the greatest seasons from a running back in franchise history, but it was also revenge. It was a wrong that was righted, right? We played this team 2 years ago, and we saw the same group of guys who were going for a three-peat, chasing history, and we stomped that down. And in that sense, I think it made it that much more juicy to me because I can be a little petty at times.
Yeah, I remember you saying in the post game after the NFC Championship game that this was, I believe, at the time that you were getting interviewed. Uh, the game was still going on, Buffalo against Kansas City, and
Yeah,
Xander asked you, "Who do you want?" And you said Kansas City
100%.
specifically. Is it for that reason?
Uh, Mainly that reason, yes. Because I didn't want anybody to invalidate what this team was doing. In 2022, everybody was trying to invalidate what Philadelphia did. They looked at the season, they're like, yeah, you didn't play any good quarterbacks. Then you get to the playoffs, oh, you played Daniel Jones and the Giants. Then you played the Niners without Brock Purdy. And then you get to the Super Bowl and, we put on this amazing performance, but we ultimately didn't win against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And everybody thought that that was a reason to write off this team. Well, you know what? There's no excuse now. You can't look at this team and say there's nothing that this team didn't come into the season with that you questioned that wasn't answered. Jalen Hurts answered questions on whether or not he could lead this team to a championship. This defense and this coaching staff show that they can lead a team to a championship. Vic Fangio got his first title. Kellen Moore proved he's a polished and a very decorated play caller in the NFL. Nick Sirianni proved that he can coach. Howard Roseman proved that he could build a roster once again. Like, everybody had something to prove in this year, and everything was validated. Everybody proved what they needed to prove, and it makes this victory to me just that much more sweeter.
Yeah, dude, I could not agree more. But like, look, for me, I think the battle I was sort of facing throughout the whole year was the complete and utter disrespect that we were getting across the national media from everybody. And I still feel like even now, after we've gotten the ultimate prize, after we've won, that people are still making segments about, oh, is Jalen Hurts really a good quarterback? Is this a flash in the pan? Does he really, like, I saw people saying, oh, he's not even really still a top 10 quarterback, even though there are a bunch of guys that have never achieved anywhere close to what he has in his career, being put ahead of him. Guys like Justin Herbert who are throwing how many picks? 5 picks in a playoff game
Mm-hmm.
in the first round. I just don't know what it is about this team, but we anger everybody. We piss people off so much. I don't know what it is. Is it the fan base? Because honestly, I actually think that the playing group, that one we just had, was the most special group of guys I've ever seen in this team's history, even more than the 52 team. Because the 52 team, I felt, were put together. That team collapsed as quickly as it came together.
Mm-hmm.
And you can argue now, look at the players who've been taken off of this roster, but I just don't think the players have been taken off this roster. Take CJ out of this one, and even he has come off it, But the players that we've got left now are mid-20s or younger, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're going to have such longevity here. And Howie Roseman, what I've got to say is he's put together since coming out of the broom closet, 3 championship level groups. And I think that for the team with that much, uh, I don't know, consistency in success, we very rarely lose ball games. Even, like, take out the slide out of it, we were 10-1 heading into that slide. This
Mm-hmm.
season, the year before that, 22, we were a machine, and you can take out a few of those games, like the Dallas Cowboy game where we went there without Jalen Hurts, and we still almost won. Like,
Right.
the the level of consistency, and it's still crazy. I'm still seeing conversations about Nick Sirianni and whether we think he's an actually good coach. He is a better, if not as just as good of a resume as Sean McVay. But because he doesn't have this sexy looking offense and he needs to have, all these OCs, and I think that's a massive and an absolutely accurate criticism of his, that he can't properly call an offense. And I do think that's why people
Mm-hmm.
think this way about him. But at the end of the day, there are also many other head coaches in the NFL who are also CEO head coaches who have had massive success, and they don't get this much criticism. I'll give you an example. Mike Tomlin, for one. Mike Tomlin, in his early years, I think, yeah, he won a Super Bowl. Did he get to 2 because he lost to the Green Bay? Yeah. So he basically had a similar resume at this point in his career as well. And yet Mike Tomlin is, an absolute genius, amazing head coach, you know, You get what I'm saying here?
I do, but I
And we're going to get
also
back to this subject in a bit,
yeah, no,
but
I know we will. So maybe I'll table my point for that discussion then,
yeah,
because
yeah.
I do have some thoughts about that.
But the main point about this team, and I'll wrap up the Super Bowl stuff in a second, was look, I'm going to be candid. Even at the start, I saw the Green Bay game, and you can go back and watch my interview with Xander at the time. I saw the way this team was, and I didn't foresee, by the way, the offense struggling as it would as the season progressed in the middle of the year.
Hmm.
Because that first year, I thought it was all fireworks. I just thought, Jalen had a really good game in that first one. Saquon was running everywhere in Brazil. I thought this team was going to be one of those teams that are going to end up being in a shootout. I didn't
Right.
know the defense would be the thing
Nobody
that
did.
carried us.
Nobody did. Nobody did.
Yeah, but I always thought this team was special. I think we all have this kind of like PTSD from seasons past. We're so used to being disappointed with this team in general that we don't have, you had to kind of separate that from what you were seeing on the field. And what I was seeing on the field was an offense that had elite players at every position, the best offensive line in the NFL, bar none. You can argue Detroit, but I still think that the Eagles as a unit, and with that coach being Jeff Stoutland, is the best offensive line in the NFL. So you put the fact that we were great on the offensive line and the defensive line, that is your bread and butter. That's why I'm looking, and we'll talk about the draft later. But that's why I think that the DNA that people need to start to try to take to become champions. And I always knew as long as we had that, that this team was going to be special, man. And that as that defense progressed, and as I was seeing, as I think you hit it on the nail on the head, that Ravens game, the Rams game showed you, hey, Saquon Barkley's great. The Ravens game the next week showed you this team is a championship level team. That was an offense, the Baltimore Ravens, that was ripping everyone to shreds week in and week out. They were by far the best offense in the NFL. And we made Lamar Jackson look confused, and I've never seen him play like that. And go 8 weeks later into the future, Patrick Mahomes looked exactly the same as Lamar did in that Ravens game. This Eagles team was always going to be good, and we can sit there and worry about Jalen's passing stats all you want or the passing offense. I always thought that was by design because sometimes you always got to go with the hot hand, and Saquon Barkley was the hot hand. Saquon Barkley was doing something historic, and I always was saying the minute that somebody figures out how to stop Saquon Barkley, we're good because Jalen Hurts is a much better quarterback than people gave him credit for, and he's got AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and those are matchup nightmares, especially if you're trying to shut down the run.
100%. 100%. Totally agree with you on that sense. Everyone
Yeah,
thinks that this guy can't operate an NFL offense. Well, he's been a starting quarterback for 4 years. And if you give any quarterback one-on-one, let alone Jalen, you're telling me Jalen Hurts can't carve up a defense one-on-one at the very least, right? Like you can give him lesser weapons and he'll carve you up one-on-one defense. Now you have, like you said, AJ, Avante, Dotson in the slot. You have Dallas Goedert, and then
I mean, we
Saquon
may
as a
not, but we'll
receiving
get into
attack.
that later.
Kenny Gamble, or again, weapons galore on this offense, and then you got the offensive line, right? So, and not only that, Jalen's ability to run. You know what I mean? So like he started doing that more in the second part of the year.
By the way,
And
you took that one out of the passing offense thing. You say, oh, the quarterback not supposed to be good because the passing offense is ranked 29, but you're forgetting about the second half of Jalen's game.
right, 100% of his ability to take off and run with it and be able to extend plays and all that jazz, right? And again, it's not like they were calling, passing games all the time either. I don't know how many passing attempts Jalen Hurts had on the year, but I could tell you it wasn't that many just because they were running the ball so well and so effectively. If I'm getting 6 yards a clip running the ball, why the hell am I gonna throw the ball, especially when I have a defense the way that it was playing week to week to week? And if you look at the history of the NFL, I know lately in the modern era we talk about passing stats and having elite quarterback play and all that jazz, but what wins in the NFL is elite defense, an elite running game, and not turning the ball over. And Philadelphia excelled at all three of those things this season. Like that is just bottom
That
line.
was the biggest thing. That was
Yeah,
not turning
100%.
the ball over thing was the biggest thing.
Yeah, and like that's with any team. You can look at any team in NFL history probably, and I can guarantee if you look at every single Super Bowl team, I would maybe say 75, 80% of those teams probably were one of the better teams in turnover margin, one of the better teams on defense, and one of the better teams running the football. You know what I mean? That's the key to winning in the postseason. So Philadelphia did that all year. They did it in the postseason, and like we said before, it just validates everything that they did all year.
Do you want to hear something? And actually, me and a few other people have disagreed on this because this has been a big topic of conversation. I have always held firm, and this has been throughout the last decade, when everybody was believing that you need to have an elite passing attack to win a Super Bowl. You need to have a Josh Allen. You need to have a Patrick Mahomes. And I always disagreed on that because I always believed that, first of all, when you get to that Super Bowl, look at Mahomes' statistics in Super Bowls. He has never eclipsed 300 yards passing.
Right.
He's never like the thing that led them to beating us the last time was not because Mahomes had some amazing game. In fact, Mahomes limped into halftime thinking that he might not play. Like we all were wondering as Rihanna got him on the stage, is Mahomes coming back? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like Isaiah Pacheco had an incredible game on the ground that game, which nobody ever talks about. Like we could not stop Isaiah Pacheco. We just couldn't stop the run as well. We kept talking about not being able to stop the pass in the second half, but that was set up because we were worried about Pacheco. You know what I mean? Look at our run game when we won the Super Bowl. We had LeGarrette Blount, who was an incredible uh, goal line threat, right? And Jay Ajayi, who we got at the trade deadline that year, was absolutely awesome. That was probably his best and only ever period of time in his career, because obviously the next year he blew out his knee, and that was all she wrote for him. But he was immense that year.
Right.
And it set up the ability for Nick Foles to be able to run the RPO. The RPO, run pass option, is not effective without the run element of that. And it wasn't like Nick Foles was some sort of great running quarterback. He was not. He was a pocket passer. And the people had to take into account the fact that we had some really good running backs. Well, Corey Clement, who was awesome that year as well. We had a three-headed monster. So I've never thought that actually, I think it's always kind of been like, okay, an elite quarterback ends up doing things well. Like Tom Brady when he won with the Buccaneers. Leonard Fournette, that was his best season. Yeah? I mean, maybe you could say the Rams Super Bowl. I don't think that they were a big run game that year. I don't quite remember. I remember who was the
Well, I mean,
running
when
back
they
that season.
you're talking about with Stafford and them, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was the year they got
Wasn't
Sony
it Cam
Michelle.
Akers?
They had Cam Akers, and they traded for Sony Michelle, right?
Yeah.
And like he had a pretty good playoff run, I believe, from what I
Yeah.
remember. And then they had like Odell, they had Cooper, they had, just a plethora of
Okay,
weapons.
maybe that one breaks my, but they also had an elite defense, and they had Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. Like,
Right. 100%. Yeah. So I will say, I do agree with you that you don't need to have an elite quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I just think it gives you the best chance to go out and get a Super Bowl.
that's not disputable. That's not disputable.
We could say all we want, but Brady was in 10 of those damn things, and he played 20 years.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning went to 4.
Brady also had a great run game, though, in every single one of those games.
100%. He had a
one of
great
those
defense.
teams.
He had a great run game, the greatest coach in the history of football, and he was Tom Brady. Peyton Manning went to 4 Super Bowls. You know what I mean? Like great quarterbacks get to the game multiple times.
But did Peyton Manning not have Adrian James?
Marino, right? Say it one more time.
I'm saying, but did not Peyton Manning have Adrian James?
He had Adrian James, Thomas Jones, right? He had Joe Adai, and then even in Denver, he had one of the best defenses I think I've seen in my time watching football with the Broncos and Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware and Aqib Talib. Like he had an elite defense then, and he wasn't necessarily the player that he was when he won his second Super Bowl, but great quarterbacks find a way. Drew Brees got there one time. Yes, he did beat Peyton Manning, so maybe he's another exception to the rule. But having an elite quarterback gives you – because then again, the NFL –
But it's not the only ingredient is what I'm trying to say.
No. Again, I think the ingredients, we talked about it before. You got to have a good defense. You got to be able to run the ball, and you can't turn the ball over. Like, you got to be – like, every one of those teams, say what you want. All of those teams, even Kansas City, even, the Patriots, they were able to run the ball when they needed to. They were really smart with the football in the playoffs. They didn't turn it over. And then on defense, whether it was scoring defense, whether it was run defense, pass, they were a top 10 unit, at least towards that point of the year when playoff time came, and they played elite ball at that point. So every Super Bowl team has to have those elements in order to
Yeah.
succeed. So in that sense, you don't need an elite quarterback. You need a guy who can just make plays at the right time. But having an elite quarterback just ups your
Yeah.
chances so
Oh, of
much.
course.
You know what I mean? So
I
like
never said that's not
that's
the
why
thing. By the way, I said passing game, by the way.
right. Okay,
So,
fair enough. Touche. Touche. Fair enough. Touche. Right? Because like I do believe you that passing yardage can be overrated at times. I don't think you need to have, like you said, top 5 passing yardage games to be able to say that you're a Super Bowl contending quarterback. You know what I mean? There's plenty of guys who've thrown for yardage all over the freaking field and haven't done shit. You know what I mean?
Joe
Excuse my
Burrow
mouth.
was
My
healthy the whole
apologies. Excuse my
year,
mouth.
didn't make the playoffs.
Right, right, but listen,
Like,
he did get to a Super Bowl.
it's
Joe
true.
Burrow's the second best quarterback in football. Let's not get it twisted. Guy's elite.
Wait,
You know what I mean?
who's your first?
Mahomes.
All right. That
Mahomes.
actually is a really good segue into our next topic here, which is
Fair enough.
the Jalen Hurts discussion. And
Ah, yes.
but amongst Jalen Hurts, we will talk about the quarterbacks in general. Because I actually made a list. I think midway through the season, I would have changed that list by now. But I made the point to Xander after the Baltimore Ravens game. I had a top 5 list. I had Jared Goff in that top 5, but I had Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, I think was my top 5. And I had Jalen at 6.
At that moment, yeah, at that moment,
Yeah.
right?
And I had Jalen at 6. And I said that take Super Bowl 59 out of it. Jalen Hurts had beaten, not 59, 57. Since the start of that 22 season, Jalen Hurts had beaten all of them, was undefeated against all of them,
Right.
removing the Super Bowl.
Head to head.
He went to Arrowhead, beat Mahomes. He beat Josh Allen head to head. Has now beaten Lamar in that game head to head. He beat Jared Goff head to head.
He beat
Who's the
Joe
other one? And
Burrow,
Joe Burrow. And beat
and he
Joe
beat
Burrow.
Stafford. Right, like he's
So
beaten a lot of good quarterbacks. He has.
that's the thing to me as we get into the Jalen Hurts conversation here that has always gotten on my nerves. That people look at his statistics, people see that he never had a 4,000-yard passing season. I believe he's eclipsed 3,000 one time, but he's never had. It even struggles for the most part to eclipse 3,000 most times. And I can understand that if you're a fantasy football guy, which by the way, he is the number 1 quarterback in fantasy football in general, but if you're a fantasy football guy looking at passing stats in general, then I can see, Jalen Hurts, he's not an elite quarterback by those numbers. His passing touchdown numbers aren't incredible, but his rushing touchdown numbers are historic, right? But one thing I was always getting on my nerves was that whenever we used to talk about quarterbacks in the past, let's see what it's like. And even when we're talking about Jalen before in that first Super Bowl run, it's like, who are the quarterbacks he's beaten this season that really can validate this season for him? And we were always kind of struggling to pull it out. Aaron Rodgers was the first name that came to mind, the first real good quarterback he was able to beat. And he was having a pretty down season that year in Green Bay. That was his last year with the Packers, I believe. But in general, Jalen Hurts had never really gone out there and beaten an elite quarterback. But now he's been doing it. And every single time that he comes up against one of these elite quarterbacks, he raises his game. People forget that because it was the last game before the slide. But one of the Jalen Hurts best games I've ever seen in a regular season was that overtime game against Buffalo. And the game winner that he ran off in overtime to win it, that he was Superman by every definition against the quarterback that everyone defines as Superman. He outdueled Josh Allen in that ballgame. And Josh Allen on that day was having one of his best ever games I've seen him play.
Right.
Our defense could not stop him. And it's just I just don't get the Jalen Hurts conversation. Maybe you can enlighten me, but the big question here is that I'm going to ask to you now. Do you believe that Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback, and where would you place him amongst the quarterbacks today, now that he's Super Bowl MVP?
So I will say he is elite, but not for the reasons that I think people would rank other elite quarterbacks for. Like we rate guys like Lamar and Josh being elite because of their physical talents and their ability to just like will their teams to victory by putting everything on their back. And like you can run out with nothing. You could run out with just 11 guys out there or 10 other guys and have Lamar or Josh at the helm, and you could win 10 plus ball games every year.
Yeah.
Mahomes is got the just the greatest clutch gene at quarterback outside of Brady, and maybe even including Brady, that I think I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen anything like Mahomes down in the fourth quarter in 1 or 2 score ball games. Like there is nothing in the history of the NFL
That's a thing.
that is like
That's a
Mahomes.
thing. Mm.
It's literally the greatest quarterback you'll ever see. Okay, so in that sense,
And also
Mahomes,
that he has the talent that Tom Brady never
he's
had.
got the physical talent, the ability to process. Like everyone like kills him for what happened in the Super Bowl. Don't get it twisted. He's one of the smarter quarterbacks in the NFL. And then Joe
Yeah, agreed.
Burrow, I think, is a freak of nature. I again, outside of Mahomes, I think he's the second best quarterback in all of football. Like I don't care
Mm.
what you throw at me. You can name me any quarterback. There's nobody better outside of
With
Mahomes than
Josh
Joe Burrow.
Allen?
Joe
Josh
Burrow's
Allen?
better than him. Joe Burrow's better than him.
Okay.
I firmly believe that. And again, that's part of me is because I've seen Joe Burrow go into Josh Allen's house and kick his teeth in.
Uh,
Like, I've seen him do it. You know what I mean? And like he's gone to Mahomes' house and beat him in a big game. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he was in position to lead a comeback drive in that Super Bowl. People forget about that, but Aaron Donald made a
mm.
spectacular player, similar to what Jalen Carter did to Matt Stafford, right? So, like Joe Burrow is not phased by any big play moment. Like he's elite in every facet of the game.
I'd
And
agree.
then Lamar's physical ability, right? So I do rank Jalen Hurts 5, and it's not because he has the best arm, because he doesn't. I think his arm is actually close to average. I don't think he is the most physically gifted quarterback in terms of accuracy, anticipation, footwork, none of that. I don't think he has elite traits in any of those things, believe it or not. He has elite athleticism. He has an elite ability to get away from pressure and use his legs. But he also has another elite trait that I think a lot of quarterbacks don't necessarily have, and that's amnesia. And what I mean by that is that no matter what happened the play before, no matter what happened on drives in the previous part of the game, it has nothing to do with the next very play. Nothing to do. And Eli Manning, in all of his ups and downs in the playoffs, was the most scary quarterback in all of football when it came to the postseason for that very reason. He came into every game, and you were saying, shit, Taki, bro. This guy,
Mm.
no matter what happened the play before, he's going to get up to the next snap and make an elite throw because he could do that. Same with Jalen Hurts. The most, just like, again, the word I can only think of is amnesia. He has elite amnesia when it comes to quarterbacking, and his ability to lead the team, to just keep everything steady, to not get too high, not get too low. Those are all things that you have to have at quarterback, and you have to be an adult in the room. You got to be mature. You got to be the person who could carry the franchise and be the face of a company. Think of, like Colin Cowherd talks about it all the time, being the face of a
I
company.
love Colin Cowherd.
But he's right about it. Like he's
Yeah.
100% right about it. Like as a quarterback, your standard has to be higher. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be this physically gifted, elite arm talent guy, because there are plenty of guys in the NFL who have better arm talents than Jalen Hurts. Like I think the top four, obviously. I think Matt Stafford is a better arm talent and a better throw of the ball than
Oh
Jalen Hurts.
yeah.
I think Justin Herbert is. I think Kyler Murray is. Like I think there are a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL
I
who have.
think Kyler and Jalen are a bit more comparable. I think that you're bringing the level a little bit closer to Jalen when you talk about Kyler Murray.
Yeah,
But
when you talk about Kyler Murray's arm is
yeah,
elite.
it
Like Kyler
is.
Murray's arm, he could flick it. Aaron Rodgers can
But so
flick it.
can but that's what I'm saying though.
No,
When you look at
so
the
can
throws
Jalen,
that
and I'm not
Kyler
denying
makes,
that. I'm not
you look at the
denying that with
throws. Oh,
Jalen.
yeah, okay,
You know what I mean? I'm definitely not denying
yeah.
that with. Yeah, I'm just saying you don't look at Jalen. The first thing you think of is like, wow, he could spin that damn thing. That is not the first thing you think of when you
To
think
be
of
to be
Jalen.
honest, Kyler Murray is the closest comparable quarterback I can make to Jalen Hurts. They're the same
Sure.
college head coach, similar skill sets. The only thing I would say is that Jalen is a lot stronger physically, so he's a
Sure.
bit of a bigger body. I would say that Kyler Murray is a light version of. Actually, you should say the opposite. When Jalen was drafted, when we first got him, I thought we're getting a Kyler Murray light, but I actually think it's become the opposite other way
Why
around.
not? Which is fair point. But again, let me ask you this then: if you took Jalen Hurts' temperament and put it in Kyler Murray's body.
Cardinals would be insane.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my point, and it's not because and it's because Kyler Murray, at least on a pound for pound, aspect, has more talent than like Jalen Hurts is not a super ultra talented quarterback.
No.
He has traits that are elite that don't necessarily show up on the stat sheet or on the field and all that jazz. Like you know what I mean? Like you have to watch Jalen Hurts play to know, like, wow, for whatever reason, he's in every single game. Generally, he's in every single game, and he's always making a play to win that damn game. That's an elite trait. Doesn't mean that he's an elite arm talent. So again, I don't want to deviate too much from the question. I rank him
Yeah.
5 in terms of elite quarterbacks because he has the resume. Like you said, he's beaten every elite quarterback in the National Football League head to head, at least in terms of playing against their defenses. He's outscored them, right? In the biggest games, in the biggest spots, he has played elite. In both Super Bowls, both conference title games, he has been elite. And he
I
has
wouldn't
won.
say the 49er game, by the way, but I don't think he was elite in that game. He didn't need to
Well,
be.
you know what? He didn't have to. Listen, he did exactly what he had to do. He managed. The quarterback is not about numbers. It's not about
Mm,
how much yardage you put up. It's about how you manage the game. It's about how you
yeah.
actually orchestrate the offense. And on that day, he was orchestrating the offense in a way where it led to 31-7. And I know they didn't have a quarterback on the opposite side. That's not my damn problem. That's not my fault that your quarterback got knocked out of the game, okay? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not anybody's fault. It's just what it is. If that were the same on Philadelphia's side, we would say Brock Purdy was elite, even though he didn't have to do anything, right?
And
So
by the
he had.
way,
Mm-hmm.
Brock Purdy wasn't like he came off the bus in crutches. Hassan Reddick knocked him out of the game. He just couldn't stand in the fight long enough. It's like saying when a boxer knocks you out with one punch, oh, it was only a knockout. That sounds like, doesn't that sound ridiculous if I
Right. Yeah.
say it
No.
that way?
Again, I'm with you. I never thought everyone was like, oh yeah, you didn't have to. It wasn't a fair fight. It's like no, he was on the field. He got knocked out of the game. The defense did its job because that's exactly what you would do on the opposite side. That's what you would want to do. You want to knock the play within the means of the game. And not like everybody thought it was a dirty play, but again, we digress. Point being is, in the biggest games, in the biggest spots that we needed Jalen Hurts to come through, he has come through and he has come through in an elite way. More so than most other quarterbacks in the National Football League. So again, because in terms of talent, I think there are many guys in the NFL who are better than him. But if you're just talking about, hey, I need to win the game, he's as good as anybody else in the National Football League.
So that leads me to my next question part of this segment. And we're talking about the Eagles as a franchise. And we're talking about some quarterbacks within the exact opposite side of the spectrum. So we've had some elite talented quarterback. Carson Wentz, before the injury, was an elite talent.
Elite talent.
Elite
Elite
arm.
talent.
Donovan McNabb, whether people look at
Great
and look,
talent. Great talent.
yeah, great talent. Michael Vick, I mean, I know
Great
we
talent.
got the
Elite talent.
second part B of that, elite talent. Randall Cunningham,
Elite.
elite talent. What did none of those have that Jalen Hurts has, that I believe, in my opinion? They did not have the winner's mentality. When things got hard, no, when things got hard, they folded. They did. And I can even go to Randall Cunningham in terms of when he played with Minnesota, he got close to it. And look, you can only blame that on Gary Anderson, and he got them in a position to be able to go and win that and go to the Super Bowl. But in general, still, he fell short in that scenario. Michael Vick, we were first round knockouts every time we had Michael Vick as our quarterback. McNabb, and how many NFC Championship games did we have to lose against opponents that were there for the taking? I still can't get over the fact that we lost to Carolina Panthers in 2003. I still can't get over the fact that we lost to the Buccaneers like in 2002 when if you saw what they did the next week to the Raiders. The Raiders were there for the taking. We were at home in our building with the best record in the NFL, and we absolutely choked that game. Like the Super Bowl against the Patriots, I do not know what McNabb did in that final drive. That was the most frustrating final drive in my life. It still haunts me to this day. I was like, what? I was 12, 13 years old at the time, but I just did not understand what it was. Ground ball after ground ball and then interception to Rodney Harrison. I'm like, what are you doing? Like Jalen Hurts in that situation, I think he gets it done. Maybe I'm looking at it in the wrong way, you know what I mean? But in Carson Wentz, you saw what happened to Carson Wentz. Nick Foles had to finish the job for him. And look, I still am a firm believer that had Carson stayed healthy, we would have won the Super Bowl anyway. Like I think he was playing at that high of a level. But I think when you get to that final stages, when you get to that big game, Jalen Hurts is so level-headed, like that it does not matter. He plays that game like it was Friday night in high school, like Saturday in college, like Sunday in the NFL. It doesn't make a difference to him. He is like this. But how would you rank Jalen Hurts? Now looking at the resume, he's the only Eagles quarterback to have led us to 2 Super Bowls. He's the first Eagles starting quarterback to actually win because the whole Nick Foles thing always kind of feels weird.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, as an Eagles fan, everybody, we have a statue of Nick Foles outside the link, but he was never a starting quarterback. I haven't even mentioned about until this point. in terms of those Eagles quarterback because he doesn't really sit
Yeah.
in that space, but yet he was the first to win one. But Jalen Hurts was the first real starting quarterback to win one, having been to two. And he's still so young; he's got so much to add to his legacy. Who would you rank above him in Eagles history from that position? Really?
Uh,
Maybe I've kind of tried to sway you too much into one direction,
no,
but
no, 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 no. It's not that because I've thought about this before, and I've made the argument that like maybe not at the moment you could say he's the greatest quarterback because people will choose Randall Cunningham in terms of like quarterback play where you're like, hey, give Randall Cunningham, AJ Brown, Devontae this offensive line and see what happens. Give Donovan McNabb this offensive line, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, and Dallas Goedert, see what happens. You know what I mean? But I will
But
say,
Donovan McNabb, sorry to cut you off for a second, but Donovan McNabb had an elite offensive line, and he has the very same head coach that everyone says is the greatest head coach right now in the NFL. He had the exact situation that Patrick Mahomes has right now. He had a great defense, the Eagles defense with Brian Dawkins, Jeremiah Trotter. We had great corners with Sheldon Brown, Shepard, and before that Troy Vincent and what's his name, Bobby Taylor. We had some great defenses like Hugh Douglas, Javon Curse later at different times, Trent Cole, right? That under Andy Reid, and he had a great offensive line, but he did have subpar weapons, which is the same I think with Patrick Mahomes now. But yet everyone expects Patrick Mahomes to create magic. That's the difference between Mahomes, for instance, and a McNabb.
right, but also in terms of talent, Mahomes is more talented, probably the greatest talent we've ever seen at the quarterback position. Andy
Mm,
Reid at that time is not the coach that he is now in Kansas City. Doesn't have
mm,
the type of GM and roster building that they have in Kansas City right now. The game back then was not the same game that it is in today's NFL, right?
yeah,
So, Andy Reid was operating, yes, in a different capacity at that time in terms of, I mean, I guess in maybe let me rephrase that. He was operating in the same capacity in terms of being a head coach, being a play caller, designing the team the same way, but it was a different game. You were allowed to smack these quarterbacks around. You were allowed to be more physical on defense. And it was in an era where elite offensive coaching, for example, wasn't necessarily the way to win football games. You had to have an
no,
elite defensive mind. And that's why guys like Belichick, that's why guys like that were running the show back then. That's why when Philadelphia had those great defenses, they were making deep playoff runs, you know? And in terms of, McNabb and Mahomes and all that. We're not going to confuse McNabb's talent with Mahomes' talent. And I
yeah,
guess that's my point. And we're not going to confuse the type of coach that Andy Reid was back then versus what he is now. He's a much better coach than he is now than he was back then. And the rules were different. Again, all that is to say, when it's all said and done, I think Jalen Hurts will be the greatest quarterback in franchise history. I don't think there'll be any way to deny it. He'll have a Super Bowl title, maybe even more, depending on how he builds this team moving forward. Um, He's going to be one of the more winningest quarterbacks in franchise history. He's probably close to, if not very close to, some of the top rushing records in franchise history. He's probably close to some of maybe the passing yardage records in franchise history. So, in that sense, Jalen Hurts will be the greatest quarterback in Eagles history. So if you have to ask me, is he the greatest quarterback right now? I'm gonna kind of do one of these sports take things where
okay, go for it.
you know what I'm saying? Like I'm just gonna hop on the bus right now and let it ride to the end because I know where it's going. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like it's like the same thing with like LeBron. It's the same thing with a guy like Luka, where you're like, hey, this guy's gonna be like one of the greatest players of all time. Let's just ride this out until his career is over, right?
right,
Even though they didn't prove it yet, for example, right? Like it's just one of those things with Jalen Hurts where you're
right.
like, yeah, you know where this is going. Let's just ride it and say, yeah, he's the greatest quarterback in franchise history. He will be the greatest quarterback in franchise history, and we'll kind of leave it at that in terms of my Jalen Hurts take.
Yeah. Look, I also don't think necessarily that winning a championship makes you like
100%.
winning all champ makes you the best. Like I'll give you an example we were just talking about the NBA. Like I'm a Bucks fan. If you were to ask me who's the greatest Milwaukee Buck of all time, I won't say Giannis, even though I think Giannis is an incredible talent. The only other thing is another guy's won a championship in that city who happens to be one of the greatest players to ever play the
Right.
game in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's the same thing. I just don't think that Jalen has got that Kareem level player to compare himself to in our franchise.
Which is fair. And again, I think the only player that's maybe even comparable to that is Randall Cunningham in terms of aura and in terms of resume. Listen, we could sneeze at 5 NFC championships all we want. Or Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz came into the building. We didn't have any quarterback that was sniffing 5 NFC titles. Let's call a spade here. Like Donovan McNabb, say what you want about him. Yeah, he came up short at times, but you know what? You get to the NFC title game that many times, you're doing something right, dude.
Which is why I hate every time that Dan Sileo compares Dak Prescott to Donovan McNabb. I just get shivers because the guy hasn't made to one.
It's a different game. It's a different game now, right? Like I'm sure if Donovan played in this game today, he would be one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League. Like he'd be putting up 30 touchdowns and like 10 interceptions and 500 yards rushing with like 7. He was an incredible talent. He was a bit of an asshole, but he was an incredible talent. Like Donovan McNabb.
I actually don't think he was an asshole to us at the time. I remember,
but I'm just saying,
Campbell's Chunky Soup. He always walked around with his mother. He seemed like a very, very endearing guy.
I'm just talking about the way people in the locker room was 50-50 on the guy. Listen, when you're 50-50 on a
that stuff came out later. I had no idea. I actually honestly was shocked. It took me a while to believe all of that, given what I felt about him originally.
It explains so much back then, right? And what they had to deal with in terms of personalities and all that jazz. So, but regardless, the point being is like he's going to be the greatest quarterback in history for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm going to just say that he is the greatest quarterback in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles.
We'll close this segment here by asking you this one straight question. If you could swap and put Donovan McNabb, because he's the obvious contender for number 2. I think before the Super Bowl, I would have said that McNabb was our greatest ever quarterback, right? Would you swap McNabb and put him into this current Eagles team and get the same results, you believe?
That is tough. Maybe not in the same fashion, but I think you would have Donovan McNabb as a Super Bowl winner. I think you would.
That says a lot about who he was as a player.
I think the world, and again, I started watching Eagles football in 2007, so I saw like basically second half career of McNabb, and that's kind of when my football fandom started for this team.
Okay.
So so maybe I'm biased in that sense, but
So you didn't get to see McNabb really at his peak. You saw
not in like the 2-3 straight NFC title game runs, but I know the type of talent that McNabb was and the elite playmaker that he was. What Patrick Mahomes is in terms of running around making guys miss all the time. That was McNabb. Like McNabb was doing that before a lot of guys in the NFL today. Like he was kind of
why do you believe that was the quarterback that Andy Reid wanted?
Andy Reid chose. Yeah, think about it. McNabb and think of Mahomes and McNabb. Patrick Mahomes is just a super McNabb with arm talent, with elite playmaking skills, cerebral, being able to recognize coverage. Not that McNabb wasn't able to do that. He's just at a different level. You know what I mean? And again, I can only imagine what Donovan McNabb would do in today's game with a lot of these other franchises. I think he would be considered one of the more elite quarterbacks. So, that one's a tough one for me because I do have a soft spot for McNabb, but I also do have a soft spot for Jalen Hurts because he is, like I said, the greatest quarterback in franchise history, right? So,
there you go. We'll keep on in a certain kind of similar sort of microscope in terms of comparing people to our history and where they stand in the franchise history. We'll talk about the head coach, and I brought him up a little bit earlier before. And this is a crazy question to think because if you were talking about him 6 months ago in this way, you would laugh your head off at me if I were to ask you this question, right? But given the resume, you can't argue. And as I said, you can actually compare his resume to early Mike Tomlin. You can compare his resume to Sean McVay because he's also got a similar resume in terms of having gone to 2 Super Bowls and having won one in a how many years has he been the head coach of the team? 4 years?
4 years.
3 years. 4 years. So 50% of the time he makes Super Bowl, 25% of the time he wins the Super Bowl. And the winning percentage on Nick Sirianni is insane. And yes,
70%. It's insane.
That also comes with the stuff that aggravates people, the sideline antics and how much you make of that, although I think stuff is very overblown.
Mm-hmm.
The awkward press conference that nobody can get over.
I can't get over.
Yeah. His play calling, as we said, when he's been given the keys to the car, has been below average, to be honest.
Right.
But somehow, some way, this guy wins. And I know we've had some incredible. We've had Hall of Fame coaches who used to coach the Eagles. You know, Dick Vermeil, um, Buddy Ryan. We got, Andy Reid, who's going to be a Hall of Fame head coach.
Mhm.
Doug Peterson, who I thought was an incredible head coach, and I think he would have had just as good success, I still believe, with this team. Because I thought that Howie wasn't necessarily cooking or in his bag up until after Doug left the building, to be
Right.
fair to him.
Right.
How do you see, hey, first of all, how do you see Nick Sirianni himself? How do you kind of get over, the whole puzzle that is him? How he becomes so successful, yet there's so many things to question about him. How do you feel about him, and how would you rank him now, given his resume similar to Jalen Hurts, in terms of our history?
Well, I guess let me just address where he ranks in the history of the franchise. I still think Andy Reid's the best coach we've had in franchise history. I know he didn't win a Super Bowl. No, Sirianni has one, and he's got a 70% winning percentage, and he's done all these things. However, the Eagles, who they are today, is because of Andy Reid and what they did when he took the helm. So, the way they build their roster, the way they go about evaluations, the way they go about their program, it's all Andy Reid. You know what I mean? So in that sense, I can't dismiss what Andy Reid was to Philadelphia, what he meant to us. And I was also one of the people who I was very sad when he got fired. Um, I thought at the time, like I understood why they did it. It just needed, at that time, he just needed to be, in a different space. If it was outside of that, I didn't think there was any reason to fire him. Genuinely. I'm one of those people who probably would have kept him along.
Given who they
Uh,
replaced him with, too. Gosh.
right, right. Well, listen, some good things came from Chip Kelly, even though I hate that son of a bitch. Lane Johnson came from him, right? Jeff Stoutland came from him, right? So some good things came about it, right? In terms of Sirianni and the puzzle that I think eloquently described him as, because he is a puzzle, he's an enigma. I don't know what to think of Sirianni at times. I think, um, in terms of managing a game and in terms of getting everybody on the same page, I think he's a lead at it. So in that sense, I think probably that's the most important job for a coach, is to get everybody in all walks of life, because you're dealing with 20-year-old kids, you're dealing with 35-year-olds, veterans, you're dealing with, prime athletes who are 27, 28 years old, who are at the peak of their powers, who have ultimate egos, who have the biggest paycheck, who have a bigger paycheck than you. And you have to somehow find a way to create a plan that they are all lock in sync with to achieve the ultimate goal. And Nick Sirianni, I think, has done a pretty good job considering what is Philadelphia and the mayhem that it can be, especially when things aren't going very well. I think he's very good at taking criticism in terms of being the face of, like, the lightning rod of hate, so to speak. So he's very good at that.
You know what I
And
find very interesting, though? He always takes the hate, but when, for instance, we're doing good stuff, he'll sit
gets
next to
everybody
Howie
else.
Roseman in a press conference and let Howie take all the glory.
Yeah,
And he'll sit there
exactly.
quiet.
Right. And I think that's also part of the reason why I think he's going to be very successful in Philadelphia, because that's the type of person that they want there. The guy to be able to take the brunt of the criticism and not necessarily lose stride, but also give deference to the program that they've built. You know what I mean? I think ego has a lot to do with what's going on in Philadelphia's front office as well. And you could tell by some of the roster moves that they have made, and you could tell by what they've done throughout their history in terms of getting rid of some players and all that jazz. But to answer Sirianni's question, is he the greatest coach in franchise history? I don't think so, at least not yet. I think right now I give my deference to Andy Reid, but it's very tough for me to argue anybody else outside of Andy Reid that Sirianni's not better than. You know what I mean? Like 70% winning percentage is incredible. That's as good as anybody in NFL history. The only guys that have more are guys like John Madden, Vince Lombardi. You know what I mean? Like guys from like the 70s and 50s and the 20s. The 1920s were the last time you were seeing winning percentages like that. And say what you want, but in both times they went to the Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles were an elite offense that game. And he is an offensive coach, even though he's not the best play caller by any means, but it's his game plan. Like it's his formula. It's his fingerprints on the operation. And they came out and played some of the best ball that you have seen all year. in those big games. So you got to give credit where credit's due with Sirianni. But he is certainly an enigma because there are times where you look at him and we walked into, I'm not going to lie, we walked into this season and we said, hey, as long as Sirianni doesn't
Stays out of the
touch,
way.
as long as he stays out of the way, we got no problems. Right? We can't forget, like people forget that part of the conversation when they want to give Sirianni his flowers. We were all looking to get rid of this guy. We were all saying like, hey, don't mess this up. But now all of a sudden they win and it cures everything. It's like, no. We were walking into the year saying this dude cannot screw this up. If he just stays out of the damn way, we're going to be fine. And everybody thought in the 2-2 stretch that the game plan, the play calling, the situational, the decision making was all him. And we were 2-2, and everyone was like, "Dude, we got to get rid of this freaking guy." Then he comes and shaves his head, all the ridiculousness that happened, and now all of a sudden you win 16 of 17, you win the Super Bowl, and all's fair and all's good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and everyone's like, "Yeah, he's Philly." It's like,
I remember that first game back off the bye when we beat Cleveland.
right?
And he's going and he's
beat
yelling
them.
at the fans, and everyone's like erupting at him because he was
Right.
kind of like that anxiety is like being released out onto him. And he clearly had it too. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
100%. And again, I wasn't too upset by it because, like, I know that's who he genuinely is, so that didn't phase me. But at the same time, you're the head coach of a football team. Your job is to be the ultimate grown-up in the room for the locker room. It's you, the quarterback, the GM, and the owner have to be the four biggest grown-ups in the room. Like, you have to be. You know what I'm saying? And like,
Can I
in
play
that
devil's
moment,
advocate for a second, though?
huh? Yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
be devil's advocate? I think in general, yes. But in Philadelphia, where you want to get your fan base incredibly
Right.
riled up, incredibly pissed off, I think he used us against ourselves.
Right. And that
I
was my
think in a
next
way
point.
he's the perfect
Coach.
personality
Yeah.
for Philadelphia.
Right.
And while
And
people might not believe that at the start because they're so upset, they're actually being punked and they don't see it themselves. They're doing exactly what he wants you to do. He wants you to be passionate. He wants you to be mad at him. He wants you to bring the energy to that stadium because, can I tell you,
yeah, go ahead.
outside of the one playoff run with Doug Peterson that led us to the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
I have not seen the link be that hard to go to and win in the postseason.
Right. No, you're right about
Even
that.
with Andy, we were not like we lost so many championship games at home. Like
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
he's got his finger on the pulse. That would be my devil's advocate thing, I'd say.
No, and again, so that was actually my next point, and I'm saying all that aside, it seems to work in Philadelphia. Like no matter what anyone wants to tell you, the results speak for themselves. Like it translates to wins. It translates to ultimate success. And like you said, the pulse of the city, the emotion, the passion, everything about Philadelphia, everyone's saying Nick Sirianni represents that on the outburst of emotion, right? So, like you said, is he the greatest coach? I don't know. I don't think so. But I will say right now, he is the perfect coach for Philadelphia. And he deserves that, big time extension where he's going to make probably 18 to 19 million dollars. Like he's worth every penny in that sense because there's not many coaches that you could put in this situation that can do what Sirianni has done. You know
Look,
what I'm
and
saying?
he keeps the ship together. I
I
think
think
as
so
well.
too.
Like
I think so too. And
that's
I
gonna
think
move on to my
for GM,
next.
that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think that's something my next question was going to be, which is, we're talking about the fact that in this offseason, you alluded to earlier, we had that big stretch and we blamed it all on our coordinators last year. Let's be honest, not just us, the organization through their actions blamed it on the coordinators that we had last year, right? Even throughout the middle of the season, we basically essentially fired our defensive coordinator. You know what I mean? And I think that was a big part of the collapse. But anyway, we brought in Vic Fangio, the man who's been trying to basically copy his scheme with other people. And we actually brought the man in and he came into our team. We brought in Kellen Moore, and as much as what you want to people's opinions and their drawbacks to the idea of Kellen Moore being our head coach, given that his previous resume wasn't necessarily sparkly in terms of results, but was good in terms of offensive output. But at the same time, we were saying, Nick, stay out of the way and let Kellen Moore do his thing. So I think we were kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth
100%.
at that time. Given the fact that this is now a second set of offensive and defensive coordinator that he's brought to the Super Bowl, How much credit do you think goes to Vic and goes to Kellen in this success versus Nick Sirianni?
A good chunk, I'll say that. A really damn good chunk. Sirianni's been here for 4 years, right? And like the second we bring in Vic Fangio, our defense goes from 32 to number one in the NFL. And again, we could say, and look, I am not somebody who thought Brian Johnson did a terrible job, but at the same very damn time, you can't tell me you look at the 23 offense and say, wow, there was like cohesive play calling here that made sense, that
Mm-hmm.
translated to victory. It was very choppy from top to bottom.
I
Now,
was yelling
maybe
at
that
my
was the
TV.
roster.
I gotta tell you,
Maybe, huh?
I was yelling at my TV in many games down
Oh,
the stretch that
100%.
year because of the play calling.
100%. And like I think people who they look at the final numbers of the roster and they're like, "Oh, it was ranked 8th in total offense in yardage. Everybody had career years." It's like, "Yeah, but what was the product like on the field? It looked terrible." And I know Kellen Moore's product on the field during the regular season was choppy, but he identified what the team needed to be able to do and use that to its advantage. Like, say what you want about Brian Johnson, we were an elite running team and we didn't run the ball very often. We were an elite short passing team and we didn't run a lot of short passes. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like, Kellen Moore at least did that, and it led to ultimately what was a Super Bowl title. So I think we have to give a lot of credit to Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, especially. Um, but Sirianni was also the guy who said, "Hey, let's call Kellen Moore. Let's go ahead and call Vic Fangio, and let's bring them into the building so that they can, help me coach this team. I want to win." Ultimately, Sirianni wants to win, and
Mm.
his ego in terms of being the one that gets the credit, I don't think he has that ego. I don't think he cares whether or not people
Mm.
say he's the reason or not. I think he's just like, listen, I got a good gig. I'm coaching
Yeah.
one of the most talented rosters in all of football. I'm coaching one of the best wide receiver duos in all of football, and I'm a wide receivers coach in my background. I can coach them up elite ways, and I win 10 plus games every year just based on talent alone. And then I have a really good quarterback, maybe an elite quarterback. I got an elite GM. I got an owner that's willing to pay all these guys. And I
Mm.
have a roster top to bottom that, is as good as anybody in the NFL. This is as good of a gig as I'm going to get in terms of coaching. I'm going to ride it out. And,
Right.
in a big market like Philadelphia, you're always going to be in big games. Like, you're always going to be on TV. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a hectic environment, but I also think that, like you said, he's able to handle it.
I
So,
also think I also think that he's a great collaborator. I think a lot of coaches enjoy working under him.
yeah,
I don't think there are many coordinators in the NFL that get to come to an organization and be given this much space to try to make it their own. I mean,
right.
you could say that the organization has told Nick to stand back, but they weren't telling him that when he let basically Shane Steichen look at the offense Shane Steichen put together in 22. Right, that thing. The reason why we were so upset the way it looked in 23 is because that 22 offense, every drive we came out there, I was like, yeah, no, we can easily score a touchdown this drive. It was a machine. You know
Yeah, it
what I mean?
was.
And that was him giving the keys to Shane Steichen, being like, let you cook. And no one had to tell him to do that. And to his detriment, maybe, he also did the same for Jonathan Gannon and his defense.
Yeah, we say that, but it had 70 sacks that year. It was the number
Yeah,
two defense in all of football, right? And it got to the Super Bowl. So,
yeah.
like I know we killed Jonathan Gannon and stuff like that. And again, I killed him too at the time, but at the same
Did
time,
a deep.
well, that's the other point I'm trying to make, right? Like these guys turn out to be pretty damn good coaches. Like Shane Steichen, say what you want, damn good head coach. I think he's one of the top two or three play callers in all of football. Like, I think he's elite at play calling. He just doesn't have elite quarterback play. I think
Yeah, I think
Jonathan
he
Gannon,
got I think he got the wrong end of the stick in terms of who was available at that point in the draft for them to take. I think Anthony Richardson was so raw of a talent, was not ready to go. And I think that Shane Steichen was given a kind of a bad deck of cards necessarily. But I
right?
still think that Anthony Richardson has
I
the
think so too.
traits to emulate what he wants. They just need to be patient with him, and he has a long way to go in his development.
Right.
I actually don't think
I
that Anthony
agree with
Richardson is
you.
that bad
Yeah,
overall.
I,
Yeah,
I, I tend to agree with you too. I think he just has to hit his layups, and once he does that, you got a big problem on your hands if you're the National Football League with Anthony Richardson, because
yeah,
Shane Steichen is an elite play caller, and then like you said, John Gannon's doing a good job in Arizona. Like they are usually a shit show in Arizona. You know what I mean? Like and he's doing the right things in that program over there. So, and then we'll see what Kellen Moore does in New Orleans, right? So,
Yeah.
I think whatever people want to say about Sirianni, how much credit you want to give him and all that jazz, you got to give credit to Vic, you got to give credit to Kellen, but at the same time, you got to give, like you said, credit to Nick because he lets them do their job. He lets them have
Mm.
autonomy and lets them kind of take the reins a little bit, and he could sit in the background and just kind of manage the game, manage the team, manage how practice get, like all that stuff that like everyone thinks is like a knock to call him a CEO, head coach and stuff. Is it really when the results speak for themselves? Like I don't think so. I don't know. You know what
Hey,
I'm
if
saying?
I have a
So
CEO that's making me billions of dollars in a company, I don't care if he's got other people managing different departments.
yeah, 100%. That's
And
perfect
neither does
analogy
he.
for it. That's the perfect analogy for it. It's getting you the results that you want. Who cares?